Alright. So without further ado, let's get that shit started, shall we? Okay, so Spiderwing. Spiderwing is the wing of Naxx. Oh shit, let me mute myself. Naxx is the wing, and I would say that has by far the most trash of all four, maybe only rivaled by the Death Knight wing. And so you're going to have to deal with a wide variety of mobs, and there's quite a bit of trash before the first boss, quite a bit of trash before the second boss, and quite a bit of trash before the third boss. There are 3 in this wing. We're going to have a Nupercon, we're going to have Grand Widow Farlina, and we're going to have Make Snap. So keep in mind, during this guide, I'm going to talk about every single pull in excruciating fucking detail, whether it be a trash pull or whether it be a boss pull, and give you guys far more information than you ever fucking asked for in this entire guide, so that way you too can react properly when your guild wipes for the first time on Spiderwing trash. One thing I would say about Spiderwing trash, by the way, is it probably has the hardest trash of Naxx, which to be honest isn't really saying a lot. When I say the hardest trash in Naxx, nothing in Naxx, like trash-wise, comes close to like the post-Twin Emps trash in AQ40. There's no trash in this game in this game that is even close to as bad as that trash in Naxx. So keep in mind, when I say it's the hardest trash, it's the most annoying trash perhaps, but it's certainly not that actually. It's not actually that hard. Nowhere close. Still fucked if your average guild double pulls though? Yeah, probably. Alright, so the first thing you're going to encounter more than likely for the very first pull of Naxx is you're going to have all these infectious skitterers. Infectious skitterers, there's a shit ton as you can see, but all they are, as you can probably tell already, is they're just AoE cannon fodder. There's going to be 10 of these per pack, and chances are you'll end up pulling 2 packs at once, or if anything, you probably should pull 2 packs at once. There's really no downside to just pulling both at once. It's just kind of like pulling the, it's like the imps in MC almost. You just group them all up, you AoE them down. There's really not much to talk about here. They're going to melee tanks for like 300 to 500 damage, so a tank's not going to get insta-chunked if he AoE taunts, for example. The only thing I guess I'll note about these infectious skitterers, they do technically have one special ability. They have an instant poison, just like a rogue does, that if applied will do like 400 to 600 extra nature damage. I could talk about how that might affect the raid in some way, but in reality, just press your AoE buttons, everybody, you can Sapper, Mage's Blast Wave, blah, 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 blah. They get deleted. Not a whole lot to talk about on that pack. The first real trash pack is going to be the next one right here. These are beasts. So basically everything up to a Nupercon, everything before a Nupercon, the first boss, is going to be beasts. And a large portion of this wing in general is beasts instead of undead. Not all of it. There are definitely some undead portions, but a good chunk will be beasts or humanoids once we get to Farlina. Okay. Second pack right here. 5 mobs contained in the second pack, and this one actually has mechanics that you'll have to deal with. They're not hard, but you'll have to deal with. Okay? So, when you're doing the second pack right here, there are going to be 3 Carrion Spinners, 2 Dread Creepers, and 1 Venom Stalker. And you're going to want to kill these in a specific order, or at least there's one mob you're going to want to kill before the others. So yeah, you got the tank down here, peeking out down here with this wall. It's for a reason. We'll get to this in a second. First things first, let's talk about the Carrion Spinners. There's 3 of these, so there's the most of these in the first pull. They've got a few mechanics. Really, only one of them is super relevant, and I'll talk about this in a sec. But first of all, they're going to melee a tank for like 700 to 900 damage. Oh, you can't see my cursor. Yeah, hold on. There we go. Sorry. Turn off the chat blur as well. All right, so you got the Carrion Spinners right here. The Carrion Spinners are mobs that will hit tanks for about 700 to 900 melee damage. So just basically just gonna hit like typical trash mobs. But their most notable mechanic is that they have a web pull. And the web pull, for anybody that knows Death Knights on Wrath of the Lich King, it kind of does the same thing. The web pull is going to grab their target and pull it towards them, like pull it towards the trash mob. And if you get web pulled, like generally speaking, whoever pulls this pack is gonna be the one that gets pulled. If you get pulled towards the Carrion Spinner, it's gonna slow your movement speed as well by 25% for like a second. So what that means is if you're pulling these packs, there's going to be more than just this one. There'll be a couple of more after this one as well. If you're pulling this pack, whether you're a hunter or whether you're a tank, what you're going to want to do is either number one, LOS this pack really quickly. So if like this first pack was pulled from around this corner to this side over here, you're going to have to pull it and either run around this corner real quick so you can LOS that pack and not get web pulled. Or number two, the web pull is a physical debuff. So what you can also do is pop a lip on pull if you're pulling to be immune to the pull. You don't have to do it in that if you get web pulled into the first pack, like you're not necessarily just insta dead. But if you do that, the healers have to know you're doing that because they're going to have to be reactive and be just ready to immediately heal you. Because otherwise, if you get pulled all of a sudden really far away from the rest of the raid into the middle of 5 mobs, you're going to die pretty quickly. So generally speaking, just use a corner to LOS them when you're pulling at all times, whenever possible, when you have carry-on spinners. And then they also do a poison spray, which is just a frontal cone of nature damage that hits for like 1300 to 1700 damage or so. Really, it's not that big of a deal, even if people get hit by it, but ideally try to tank these facing away from the raid. You can absolutely stack these up and cleave them down and AoE them down, but I just wouldn't. Just try your best if you're off tanking one of these to face it away from the raid so you avoid as much poison damage as possible here. Okay, and then you've got the Dread Creepers, these ones right here. There's 2 of these in each one of these packs right here, and they're melee damage, typical trash mob, about 600 to 1000 damage. The only mechanic they have, the only thing you'll have to worry about is the Veil of Shadows, so this debuff you're seeing right here and on most of the raid right now. It's a typical Veil of Shadows. It reduces the healing done on the target by 75%, so just like what you'd see on Gehennis, for example, or it's like what Neff casts. So you just want to have decursors decurse the tanks, basically. Just prio decursing the tanks so that way you can still heal them. You don't really have to decurse the entire raid, because if it's not a tank, you're not super worried about somebody having reduced healing on them. As long as you're not a gorilla as a DPS on this fight, you shouldn't really take all that much damage, or certainly not enough to the point where you're going to die. So just decurse your tanks. Other than that, just stack these up with the carry-on spinners. Like I said, AoE them, cleave them down. And then finally, we got the Venom Stalker. He's the one down here. He's the one that is being tanked around this corner, and for good reason. The Venom Stalkers, I would say, are the most dangerous portion of these packs right here. And, like, keep in mind, these packs aren't hard. When I say the most dangerous, I'm talking about, like, if you really fuck up, this is probably what's going to kill you. But overall, most guilds will just be able to face roll this trash. So the Venom Stalker is going to hit the hardest of these 3 types of mobs. He's going to hit tanks for like 800 to 1200 or so damage. But the most notable mechanic they have is a mechanic called Poison Charge. So a Venom Stalker, throughout an encounter, will randomly choose to pick just a random player in the raid and Poison Charge them. So what happens is when he picks that target, he charges towards them. As soon as that player gets hit by the charge, it's going to apply a poison to everybody in range of that person that get hit by the poison charge onto the player. That's going to deal 2500 damage every 3 seconds for 9 seconds. So basically it's going to take 3 times for 2500 damage, which is not an insignificant amount of damage. Taking 7500 damage on what is essentially going to be the entire raid. Not ideal. So what you want to do to avoid that is have the Venom Stalker be out of LOS of the raid. So that way he can't charge, he basically can't charge anybody because he's out of LOS of the rest of the raid. So there's a reason why you see the Venom Stalker being tanked down here. If you're a tank, and usually what you just want to have your main tank tanking the Venom Stalker, you want to tank it in like Chromag fashion, where the tank is in LOS of the raid still, but he's positioning the Venom Stalker in a way where it's out of LOS. So he's peeking around the corner so the healers can still heal him, but the Venom Stalker can't charge anybody right now. So usually what you do is you'll focus down the carry-on spinners here, the Dread Creepers as well. And then once you're done, then the entire raid can go in on the Venom Stalker around the corner here and kill it. You still might get poison charged at this point, but if this is the only mob left, if you get poison charged, you can drop Poison Cleansing Totem, people can heal up the damage, it's less of a big deal. And how did Halatar die there? He probably just ripped thread on one of the mobs. Okay, so keep in mind, that was the first little section right there, that was just the very beginning of the wing. So if you're wondering where exactly to position right there, this is just the start. the first pack that you pull is off on this side over here. So just pull them around the corner, have the tank them at this initial corner right there. Boom. Easy. Like I said, it's not actually that hard. All right. Keep in mind, in this next room right here, we went left from that previous little ramp that we just went down. There's going to be a couple more of these packs of infectious skitterers, just once again the AoE cannon fodder. If you pull them, just AoE them down. Okay, next pack. This is the exact same comp right here, exact same type of trash mobs that we just fought in that previous pack. And so this is more of an example where it's not the worst idea if you're pulling here as a tank to lip on the pull, so that way you don't get immediately web pulled by the dread creepers, or sorry, by the carry-on spinners into this pack. Because if you're a tank that pulls and all of a sudden you're just like whoop, and you're just like right here in the middle here all of a sudden because you got pulled in, there's a good chance you'll just get insta-wrecked because you'll be out of range of your healers all of a sudden. So it's a good yep, so there you go. He gets pulled in way off into Narnia. Now, what you see happens and what the strategy they were using here, and this is a strategy you can use as well if you want to, is there was a bunch of hots and shields pre-rolling on the tank when he pulled here. So when he pulls and gets pulled all the way over here, the healers who put the hots on him get healing aggro, and so the spiders start running towards the healer instead of the main tank. It's not really ideal. The reason I don't love this strategy is just because if the tank gets pulled all the way over here, he's basically useless for the first part of the fight. If anything, I'd rather have like a hunter be the sacrificial lamb or something. But that's a way to do it. A more reliable way to do it, like I said, is just open with a lip on pull, but you might not necessarily have your potion cooldown for every one of these pulls. Okay, same deal here. If you're taking the Venom Stalker, it's a little bit harder to find a good spot to LOS, so you can see the entire raid takes the poison right there. As Horde, that's not that big of a deal because Shamans can drop Poison Cleansing Totem, but as Alliance, that'll be a little bit scarier. If the entire raid takes poison, that does 2,500 damage every 3 seconds, so... I believe, let me make sure here. I believe... Let me check the range. Just make sure I can tell you tell you guys the right range on those Venom Stalkers charge, because I believe it's technically outrangeable if you range it far enough. Okay, so yes, technically you can outrange it as well, so that's your other option. If you want to tank the Venom Stalker more than 40 yards away from the raid, that will also prevent him from charging the raid because he'll be out of range of the rest of the entire raid. So on this pack, that's an option, or you can just choose to take the charges, but it's going to be a lot of damage. If you're trying to like zoom as fast as possible, if your monk is steering your way through the section, then at the end of the day, just tank him next to the raid. You're going to take poison charges and just cleanse the poison. But if you're trying to minimize damage on the raid, either try to find a good spot to LOS, which for this specific pull, there really isn't all that good of a one, or just pull it out of range. Yep, and it's down. All right, so keep in mind, to eventually progress through this little, wing, you're gonna have to go this way to the right. Like the eventual way to get through here is this gate over here. But there's gonna be a gate over here that's not gonna open until you kill the first boss in Nubricon. So to get to a Nubricon, you're gonna turn left here and go through this doorway. All right. Third pack, once again, the exact same type of pack as before. You're gonna have to deal with 3 of these exact types of packs before you get to a Nubricon. A Nubricon's on the other side of that door at the end of this hallway right here. Okay, here's another pack of random infectious skitterers. Like I said, there's a couple of packs that just pat throughout this room. If you pull them, just AoE them down. If you pull those infectious skitterers while you're fighting the previous trash pack of like the Venom Stalkers, then it's fine. Just pull them in and AoE them down. Okay. Another pack where your tank or the puller probably is going to get web pulled, so you can see what they do here is the Venom Stalker this time around. They pull everything else around the corner. The Venom Stalkers kept in the other hallway out of LOS of the entire raid, and basically just one healer goes in to be in LOS of the tank. This is a druid. So the druid goes in LOS to heal the tank that's tanking the Venom Stalker, and the druid's going to get poison charged, but it's fine. As soon as the druid gets poison charged, the druid just cleanses themselves and keeps healing the tank. No big deal. So this pack's a bit easier to deal with because you can just LOS around the corner. Like so. And then you go another Venom Stalker. Kill that. Cool. There we go. And just like that, we're ready to do the first boss, Anub'ar Khan. Are these packs going to be double/triple pulled in speedruns? Maybe? Not sure, to be honest. There's probably no reason why you couldn't. Yeah, you probably could just AoE your balls off. Never tried, though. Okay, so we got Anub'ar Khan. This is one of, if not the easiest fight in the entirety of Naxx. Anub'ar Khan, back in retail vanilla, was considered one of those bosses, like if you weren't really truly farming Naxx, but you just wanted to be able to dip your toe into Naxx, this would be the boss that you'd probably go to first, because he was kind of the loot pinata of Naxx. Also notable in that this is one of the very few cleave fights that exist in this raid. The vast majority of fights in this dungeon are just single target fights, but this one does have a couple of adds that you start with, so you get to press your cleave button as a warrior, which is always fun. So, Anub'ar Khan has approximately 1.67 million HP, so he actually has a fair amount of HP. But to be honest, none of his mechanics are particularly difficult, so... For starters, let's just watch the start of this fight. All right. When you pull, it's gonna aggro the boss, and of course the two adds. Consecrated Sharpening Stones. Must be nice to have these on the release of Naxx. We're not gonna know what that's like. RIP. Pull it, pull it. Okay. Now, honestly, the way we did this fight was kind of sloppy, or at least the way we did the opener of this fight was pretty sloppy. And so you can see we're going to end up taking more damage here than we really should have. And we end up not really blasting down this fight as fast as we could have. But this is, I guess, the more traditional way to do this. And yes, there are many Calamity members in this raid that you probably recognize. The very same ones that exist to this day. So, when you aggro the boss, you're going to have to deal with the Crypt Guards and the boss itself. So, the Crypt Guards, we'll talk about those first. Crypt Guards are mostly a joke, and they're mostly going to fall over. But they do have some mechanics that are going to force you to at least react to them a little bit to make sure that, for the most part, you can just cleave them down as efficiently as possible. So, they don't hit particularly hard. They're just going to melee tanks for about 600 to 900 damage. No big deal. They do have an ability called Acid Spit, which just spits on their main target. It's just a single target attack that does just an additional... It'll put like a stack. It'll apply a stack to the target. Like it's an undispellable thing, kind of like Huhuron does, for example, where it stacks like acid stacks on top of the tank, which does more and more damage over time as you get more and more stacks. But it only does 250 damage per stack, and these guys are going to die so fast that in reality it's going to be a non-mechanic that you're not really going to have to worry about here. And then they're also going to cleave. They have a cleave ability that will hit the closest 3 targets, like to their main target. So it doesn't do that much damage. It's going to do about 800 to 1,000 damage on plate. So it's not nothing, but it's not hugely scary. So as a healer, just make sure that you watch the people getting cleaved and you can heal them up at the start of the fight. But as like a caster, like a cloth wearer, don't stand right on top of the spiders just so you don't get cleaved. Not that scary. And then perhaps their most notable mechanic is their web. So you'll see here at some point during this fight at the pull, everybody gets webbed and rooted in place. Like... Wait for it, wait for it. Like this. Okay, I never got webbed for some reason, but most people do. I would assume I probably resisted it. And so all this is like it's a root. It's just like being frost novaed or something like for 10 seconds. And it's annoying because if you're trying to cleave these adds down with the boss, which I don't know why we weren't here, but we really should have been. But if you're trying to cleave these adds down with the boss, and you absolutely can, there's really no reason why you have to separate them from the boss. Generally speaking, what you're going to want to do is have the melee all FAP on pull. to avoid being webbed like this, so that way you can continue dragging the boss, because you do have to drag the boss to a more specific position. And so you can just drag these spiders along with the boss. As long as the melee are fapped, they're not going to get rooted, and you can just run the boss all the way to the back of the room with the ads while you're cleaving your balls off. Hey, what's up, Groverton? Coming in hot with that tier 1 sub. Woo indeed, dude. Appreciate it. Your sub will go directly to the Hot Pockets and Doritos Fund. Thanks for hanging out, dude. Glad you're enjoying. Okay, so does spider belt work for that web? I assume it probably would, yeah. Although I'm not really sure if you want to wear your spider belt over an onslaught girdle for this fight, but I suppose it's just like a root, it's just like a frost nova, so anything that would either dispel or mitigate a frost nova would work on this web as well. But really, the easiest thing to do on this is, if you're melee, just fap on pull. There's no need to overcomplicate things. You'll desperately need a potion for anything else this fight anyways. And then the last thing you're gonna have to worry about on these guys is they do enrage when they're below 50%, so you're gonna see they turn red. They start glowing red. One of them does here, and then waiting for this guy. God, we were doing this fight so terribly, to be honest. Anyways, you see them turn red. It's just a typical enrage. They start attacking 60% faster and do 50 more damage per swing. So they'll start hitting the tank a little bit harder, but not an unreasonable amount of damage that can't be healed through. So just keep cleaving your balls off. Like I said, this fight is a cleave fight. Take advantage of that. Have fun with that. Cleave the ads down at the start. Go full on big dick mode. Don't do what we did and separate these from the boss. Just stack them with the boss. All right. Okay. Now, you can see the boss got taken back to this section of the room, and that is for good reason. So once you're done with the ads, ideally, you were done with the ads already over here, but this is going to be where you're going to fight the boss during the phase 1 of this fight. Here at the back of the room. So the reason why this positioning is this way is for a Nubracon's most notable mechanic called Impale. Impale's a mechanic that the Nubracon does about every 15 seconds. It's not an exact time, but it's in a window, but based on what we were seeing on the PTR, it's about every 15 seconds or so. And, okay, first of all, I'm going to tell you the way that we are pretty sure it's supposed to work, and the way traditionally it worked as far as we can tell on retail vanilla and on private servers. And then I'll tell you the way it was working on the PTR, because it was not consistent between those two. The way it's supposed to work is it's going to pick Nubracon's going to pick a random person in the raid and do these little ground spikes. And so when I say ground spikes, let's go back to the start of this fight and I'll kind of show you. You'll kind of see what I'm talking about here. Okay, see me get knocked up like this? That's due to the Impale. So what he's going to do is he's going to cast the Impale in a direction, and you're going to see a bunch of spikes pop up in the ground. Like, it's a little hard to tell from this POV, but there's like ground spikes here that went in the direction that a Nubracon was facing, and he cast it like this way, in a line. So what a Nubracon traditionally was supposed to do is turn around, pick some random raid member, and toss these spikes in a straight line towards the player. And if you get hit by these ground spikes, you get knocked in the upward direction, so like straight up. And if you get hit by the spikes, they're supposed to hit for an unmitigated about 3.9k damage. It is it's physical damage, so it can be mitigated by armor. So as plate, it's going to hit you for something like 1.5 to 2k. If you're cloth, it's going to hit harder. It's probably going to hit you for closer to like 3k. And so that means if you're cloth, it's going to be kind of scary, and you're going to get knocked up, so you might have to deal with fall damage. If you're mage, it's fine, you could just blink it. If you're warlock, it's not the worst idea in the world. Well, okay, traditionally what you would do is you'd either pop like a noggin fogger until you got the slow fall buff, or you could like lip to prevent fall damage. As plate, it didn't really matter. Like, you weren't going to take enough damage to die anyways from the Impale. And so this would happen just periodically throughout the fight every 15 seconds. Now, on the classic PTR, the Impale by a Nubracon was only targeting a Nubracon's top threat damage, or top threat target, which I'm 99% certain that's not working correctly, or at least wasn't working correctly on the PTR when it was on the PTR and when we were testing it. Because frankly, if the Impale only ever hits the main tank, as long as the main tank is facing an Ubercon away from the rest of the entire raid, that would mean that the only person for the entire fight that gets hit by the Impale is going to be the tank, which is not that big of a deal. Like, if it's just the tank taking Impale damage, then it can be very easily healed through, and it's not really that big of a deal. So I don't know if that's going to be how it is when it's released on live. I mean, based on what we saw in the PTR, I guess there's a strong chance that that's going to be the case, in which case the Impale is kind of a joke mechanic that you don't even have to worry about. I would at least prepare for the possibility that this might be fixed, and that anybody in the raid can randomly be targeted by the Impale. But we don't know. We're not going to know until it releases on live. It will either be a annoying but manageable mechanic, or a completely non-factor that you're just going to heal the tank through and call that good enough. Okay, so by the way, the Ubercon, as far as his auto attacks on tanks are concerned, aren't really all that scary. They're going to hit tanks for about 1 to 1.3k per auto attack. Nothing that can't be managed by a solid team of healers or anything like that. Ubercon is not a, relative to the rest of the Naxx boss, is not a particularly hard-hitting boss. All right, so there is technically a second phase, or maybe not a second phase, but a different phase of this fight, and it's the Locust Swarm. So what a Ubercon is going to do is 1.5 minutes into the fight. So this is on a set timer. This is not a window. Every time, exactly 1.5 minutes into the fight, a Ubercon is going to cast his Locust Swarm. It's a little bit hard to see what he does. You can kind of see it here. What he does when the Locust Swarm is about to start. The good news is, like I said, you know when it's going to happen, about 1.5 minutes into the fight. What he's going to do when you know it's going to start is a Ubercon is almost going to start bowing to like towards the main tank. He's almost like, you're going to see him like tilt downwards. And that's an indication that the Locust Swarm is about to start. So watch this right here. He's going to... Okay, right here. See? He faces downwards. He sticks his ass up into the air. Starts shaking dead ass. And that means the Locust Swarm has started. So what this means is, if you're melee, it's time to book it the fuck out of here. It means you need to get out of range of an Ubercon as soon as possible. The Locust Swarm winds up for a few seconds. Like, it starts spooling up for a few seconds, so it gives you an opportunity to get out of it. And so once the Locust Swarm is actually going, what he's supposed to be doing is he's releasing a cloud of locusts. The boss is releasing a cloud of locusts around himself. That is going to cause damage to all nearby players to the boss. It's going to do something like, I want to say it's like 2,500 damage every 2 seconds or something. It's a lot. Don't stand on the Locust Swarm. And it will also silence you and prevent you from using any sort of abilities. So if like you're a mage and you get caught in the Locust Swarm, you're kind of fucked, because like you can't blink out because it silences you as well. In reality, nobody should ever be caught in the Locust Swarm. He telegraphs the ability when he's going to do it by bowing to the main tank, and he's going to continue following the main tank and the main tank only. He doesn't drop threat or anything. So what you want to do to deal with the Locust Swarm, come on, look at the boss. Poggy, buddy. Okay, perfect. What you're going to want to do to deal with the Locust Swarm is just basically have the tank kite him around the room when it's happening. So the good news about the Locust Swarm is it also reduces the boss's movement speed by 40%, so it becomes slower than player movement speed. Which is good, because a Ubercon will still continue to follow his highest threat target, which is going to be the main tank, right? So all the main tank has to do, if you look at the minimap, like you're tanking him down here. When a Ubercon starts his Locust Swarm, the main tank can just run in a semicircle around the outside of the room like this. So that way the raid can sit in the middle of the room while this is happening and be out of range of the Locust Swarm. So the main tank just runs in a semicircle around the outside of the room. A Ubercon's going to chase him with the Locust Swarm going on around him, which means that everybody on this side of the room is in relative safety. And then the Locust Swarm is going to last for 20 seconds. Usually when the Locust Swarm ends, he's going to end up running about halfway around the room. So as soon as the Locust Swarm ends, then the tank picks him up again, starts tanking him on this end of the room, and you just keep nuking him down. It goes back to what it was beforehand. Now, in theory, the Locust Swarm could happen again after another 1.5 minutes, but in reality, no guild is ever going to see more than one Locust Swarm unless they have like literally no idea what they're doing in 2020. Also keep in mind, when this Locust Swarm happens, there's going to be a Crypt Guard that spawns. Like, so the same type of mob that we dealt with at the start of this fight. Like one of the two ads, this is the same mob type. So all the same abilities, just pick them up. This is what you do as a DPS while the Locust Swarm is going on, so you don't just sit here in the middle of the room with your dick in your hand. Just nuke down the Crypt Guard. Not hard. And then you can see Nubricon finishes his Locust Swarm, ends at this portion of the room. We get impaled. That wouldn't happen on classic PTR, at least right now. And you go back to nuking the boss. Okay. The only other thing to mention on this fight is that when you kill that Crypt Guard during the Locust Swarm, eventually what a Nubricon will do is he'll cast what's called a, I think it's like Crypt Scarab Explosion, something like that. Basically, all he's going to do is he's going to spawn a bunch of scarabs, like little mini scarabs, on top of the corpse of the Crypt Guard that you killed during the Locust Swarm. Corpse scarabs, that's right, yeah. I think it's 10 of them. They're just like AoE cannon fodder. It's kind of like the Vecnus Borers spawn that would spawn when the Vecnus Warriors die. They're the same sort of mobs. So just have the casters press their Blast Wave button, Zapper, blah, 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 whatever you want to do, Dynamite, and just melt the ads, AoE them down, and then get back on your merry way to killing the boss. That happens, keep in mind, based on what we were seeing on the PTR, like 20 to 25 seconds or so after that Crypt Guard dies during the Locust Swarm is when the Corpse Scarabs get spawned. And then something else to note during this fight is if anybody dies at any point during this fight, that will also spawn Corpse Scarabs. So if a person dies at the spot in which they died, it's going to spawn 5 of the Corpse Scarabs. So in theory, if like half the raid dies at some point for some reason, it's going to spawn a bazillion bugs on the floor that you're going to have to deal with. But if you have half your raid die on a Nubricon, I worry about your prospects of killing the rest of this entire raid. So for the most part, that's a non-issue that you don't really have to worry about. And then he dies. Okay, so realistically, will you see the Locust Swarm? Because it happens after a minute and a half into the fight. The answer is your average guild still might. Like I said at the start of this VOD, or at the start of this fight, a Nubricon has 1.67 million health. For context, a boss like Flamegore has 1 million health. So the question is, how fast do you kill Flamegore right now, for example? If you kill Flamegore in something like 40 to 45 seconds, if your guild kills Flamegore in 40 to 45 seconds or so, then there's a chance then you might be able to kill before the Locust Swarm. So like, for example, Onslaught can kill Flamegore right now in like 35 seconds. So yes, chances are we will be able to avoid the Locust Swarm and never see this mechanic, basically ever. But for your average guild with an average amount of raid DPS, I'd say the average kill time right now in BWL for Flamegore is probably closer to the neighborhood of like maybe 45 to 50 seconds, so a lot of kills will probably cut it close, to the point where you might see the Locust Swarm. It's not really that big of a deal. The Locust Swarm is not a hard mechanic to deal with. All it's going to do is just make the fight go a little bit slower, but I think eventually once this fight is on ultra farm status and once you're in like a solid amount of Naxx gear, most guilds will probably kill before the Locust Swarm. But like I said, if you get a Locust Swarm, it is not the end of the world. Is he immune to all damage during the Locust Swarm? He's not, but if you're in range to damage him, you're probably in the Locust Swarm, and therefore not a good idea to try to kill him during the Locust Swarm phase. Okay, so there you go. There's a Nubricon. Tough fight. 99% certain you don't want to be casting either even as a cast run. Let me check to see if it says specifically what the range is. I can tell you that traditionally on private servers the answer was a no. You wouldn't damage him at all during the Locust Swarm phase. Yeah, I'm not sure what the exact range is, to be honest, but okay, according to Wowhead, it's 30 yards. You might be able to in that case. You can try it. if you want. I can tell you traditionally on private servers, the traditional strat was don't bother trying to damage him during the Locust Swarm phase. Maybe you can. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm not sure, to be honest, but if you want to give it a shot, go for it. But chances are, like I said, it doesn't really matter either way. Okay, so moving on. So now that you killed a Nubricon, this little gate that was previously closed before Nubricon is now open, so now you can continue through this portion. Cool. More infectious skitterers, just AoE them down, same thing as before. And then now we're going to head into this room. Now, this room has two of the same types of packs, one on the right side, one on the left side. You don't have to kill both. I'm sure eventually Warcraft logs will probably force us to kill both, just a hunch, but if you're just doing your first run and you don't give a flying fuck about your qualifying speedrun time, then you only have to kill one pack on one side of the room. You can just walk past the other once you kill one of them. So if you pull one of these packs, just hug either the right or left side of the room. Doesn't really matter which side you go. And these packs are filled with 5 carry-on spinners, so the same carry-on spinners we dealt with in those first few packs at the start. And then it's going to have 1 Crypt Reaver. That's a new type of mob that I'll talk about here in a sec. But keep in mind, the carry-on spinners are the ones that will do the web pull that pull you into them. So just like the previous packs we were talking about, make sure if you're pulling these as a hunter, for example, you either lip on pull, or you LOS really quickly, or you have healers ready to save you as soon as you get pulled in. Otherwise, you might just get pulled straight into the pack and insta die. But same deal, pull these guys around the corner like we did beforehand, and then just, you can cleave them down, AoE them down. There's really nothing that prevents you from just stacking them up and cleaving your balls off. And then once you handle them, take the rest of the DPS over to the Crypt Reaver here, nuke him down. Crypt Reaver, in reality, is a joke. He's not gonna do anything that you're gonna be particularly worried about. I'll go over his mechanics just in case you care. He does hit a little bit hard for a trash mob. He's gonna hit tanks for like 1.1 to 1.2k-ish. He also has a cleave, just like the cleave that we mentioned on the Crypt Guards during a Nubricon. This mob is very similar to the Crypt Guard on a Nubricon in that fashion. A cleave that'll hit the 3 closest targets. It hits for like 1.2 to 1.6k on played, so it's not nothing. Healers, just make sure you're focusing on healing the melee while they're attacking the Crypt Guard, or the Crypt Reaver, but nothing unmanageable. As a range, just don't stand on top of these, because the cleave will slap you if you're just wearing cloth, but there's no reason to be standing on top of this as a ranged DPS anyways. And they also do what's called a virulent poison, that it's a poison that targets a random player, and it applies a dot that will tick for 200 damage every 3 seconds. Yes, you can cleanse it, so you can also use Grounding Totem to absorb it if you want to, but safe to say, not exactly a mechanic you're super worried about. And that's all they do. They're mostly just tank and spanks. Are there enough trash mobs in 1 ID for Echoes of War? There are, yes. If you do a full clear of all the wings, you will get enough mobs down to get credit for that quest. Alright, now, for whatever reason, we decided during this run to pull both these packs in this room. Like I said, you don't really need to. You can skip one by just running, by hugging one side of the room, but we're gonna do it again for some reason. Sure. Let's kill more. Get more Naxx trash loot. Yeah, why not? Okay. AD rep, yeah, sure. Alright, now we're entering the section that's approaching Fairlina. So the next 2 mobs you're going to have to deal with are going to be Necrostalkers. Now these guys pat actually quite a ways, so they pat from the entrance of this room, if you look at the minimap up here, all the way down this hallway and into this little cave portion that leads to Fairlina. They pat like all the way through here, down this way, into this room, and then back up. So you're going to run into them either at this portion, or perhaps a little bit later on after you kill a couple of more like of the tiny infectious skitterer packs. The Necrostalkers are essentially identical to the Venom Stalkers that you fought at the very start of the instance, or the start of the wing. I don't really know why they have different names, to be honest, because as far as I can tell, their abilities are exactly the same. They even look exactly the same, even if they're called something different. So these are the same guys that have the poison charge ability, the one where they'll pick a random member of the raid, charge that member of the raid, and put the poison on the entire raid. And the poison doesn't do an insignificant amount of damage. So just like it was for the start of the raid, the poison's going to tick for about 2,500 damage on everyone it hits. So if they charge somebody and the poison goes out in the entire raid, make sure you cleanse it ASAP. And to be honest, since it's only these two guys, you don't really have to worry about like doing any sort of like LOS cheesing at the start to make sure like, oh, got to make sure these are out of LOS of the raid. Like it's just these two. You don't have to deal with anything else. So you can stack them up and you can cleave them. You want to try to make sure to nuke these down as fast as possible so you don't get like a ton of poison charges throughout the entirety of this fight. If you're Horde, it's pretty simple. Just drop Poison Cleansing Totem, and that's not hard. If you're Alliance, just make sure that the Pallies and the Druids are focusing on Poison Cleansing. Otherwise, stack them up and cleave. Nothing different than the previous mobs we fought. Oh, that mob died with only 4 Sunders. Pathetic. Okay. And then it's more of these Infectious Skitterers. Once again, just AoE your balls off, Dynamites, Zappers, Blast Waves, all that good shit. Okay, now, this is moving down towards Faralina. Another Infectious Skitterer back. Once again, just AoE. Was I Poggy on K3? Only at the very end. I acquired his account near the end after Poggy had quit when Rampage fell apart. Okay, and then when you get to this cave portion right here, God, my stream quality really fucking sucked back in the day, didn't it? Feels bad. When you get to this little cave portion, there's going to be another pair of Necrostalkers that you reach, the same guys that do the poison charge. Once again, stack them up, cleave them down. Make sure you cleanse the poison, because the poison does hit pretty hard. As long as you do that, nice and easy. Alright, so now, heading down this cave right here. See if I can get a better POV of what I'm talking about. Okay, so when you head down this cave, if you look at the minimap, you can go in 2 directions. You can go left and you can go right. If you try to go right, there's going to be like this giant web door right here at this little break, at this little cutoff right here. And you won't be able to pass through it, so you're going to have to go left initially. And left will lead you down to Grand Widow Faralina, the second boss of the Spiderwing. So when you approach this section right here, you're initially going to have to go left and start clearing the mobs down near Faralina. So it's going to have some more Infectious Skitterers. As you can tell, a consistent trend. There's a lot of these packs in this wing. They're not hard. AoE them down. Okay, and now we look down. So when you look down at Faralina's room, it's going to have a ton of humanoid mobs that are sitting there kind of like being their Faralina's groupies. Like you got a bunch of Faralina simps that are sitting down pledging their allegiance to the Scourge and their allegiance to Faralina, and you're gonna have to deal with them before you can actually kill the boss herself. So, first things first, let's take care of the Faralina simps, shall we? Okay, so there are 8 simps per pack that you pull, and I believe there's in total 6 packs that you pull. Something like 5 or 6 packs that you pull of Faralina simps. So, these packs are actually not a joke. As far as, okay, 6 packs. Yeah, that's what I thought. These packs are not a joke. You're going to have to at least take them, I'm not going to say seriously, but you're going to have to at least pay attention to what they do, because otherwise these guys can very easily wipe a raid if you're just trying to, like, beat your head against a wall and just run straight into them and just hoping for the best. There are 2 types of mobs in these Faralina trash packs. There are Naxx cultists, and there are Naxx acolytes. Ooh, that's a lot of pog use. Get a halfway decent POV here. Okay, so Naxx cultists, Naxx acolytes. We'll talk about the cultists first. Now, first things first, let me just say, these guys just in general do a lot of spell damage. And these guys just, to the raid in general, especially if you pull them on top of the raid, are going to do a lot of damage, so healers get ready to do a lot of burst healing on these guys, because a lot of people are probably going to get in danger very quickly and need saving. So, starting with the cultists, these guys are annoying in that They're going to cast an AoE knockback called a Shadow Burst. So it's an AoE knockback when you get hit by it. If you're just within relatively close range of the cultist, you'll get hit by the Shadow Burst. It'll hit you for like 300 to 500 damage. Not that scary. But it's also going to knock you back a short distance. So let's see. I think it happens to me right here. Okay, knocks me back like that right there. And perhaps most notably, it clears the threat. It just completely clears its threat table when it does that knockback. So it's going to just run off in some random direction as soon as that happens. So what you want to do is, generally speaking, the traditional strategy for these packs is to split up the acolytes and cultists. So you would pick up the cultists, like take those, or sorry, you'd pick up the acolytes, you'd take those into the raid and DPS them, and you'd pull the cultists away, usually off to the side, like over here against the wall, and have dedicated tanks just tanking a cultist per tank. And as soon as the AoE knockback goes back, the tank just immediately taunts, because you can, like, if you position your back against a wall as a tank over here, the knockback goes out, you're just against a wall, so you don't move anywhere. You instantly press your taunt button, so that way it goes right back on you. And you just tank it until the cultists are dead. Or sorry, until the acolytes are dead, and then the raid moves on to the cultists and kills them. You're saying no AoE, we'll get to that. I'll talk to you about the strategy you're actually going to use in 2020. So traditionally speaking, if you're attacking the cultists, just make sure your back is against a wall. Kind of like if you're attacking a Lasher before Huhuron in AQ40, who do the knockbacks. Just make sure if you're DPSing the cultists, have your back against a wall ideally. So if you do get knocked back, you don't get knocked back super far. Now, the knockback isn't nearly the type of range that the Huhuron Lashers are, but it's still enough to be annoying. All right, so in Fairlena's room, by the way, it's got yet another Infectious Skitterer pack that will just patrol around the entire room. Once again, press your AoE buttons. Ooh, we actually pulled a Cultist pack at the same time as these Skitterers. That's a little bit scary, but 2 people dead, 4 Moss, rip. All right, here's going to be a better example of how these packs can be scary if you do them incorrectly. For example, if you pull them at the same time as Infectious Skitterers. Okay. Why did people just die there? It's largely due to the second type of mob, the Acolytes. Let's do the next one. We'll talk about the Acolytes. Okay, you can see the Acolytes are all marked, right? They've all got an individual mark over their head, and that is for a reason. The Acolytes are really the mobs that will actually kill you in these packs. They have two abilities, both of which slap. They have a Shadow Bolt Volley, which will hit all players within 30 yards or so for about 800 to 1k damage. And this is just AoE on everybody. This is not LOSable, by the way. We tried this on the PTR. You cannot LOS these Shadow Bolt Volleys. And then they also have an Arcane Explosion, which hits for about 600 damage or so. And it's like a 10-yard range, so like a typical Arcane Explosion. And generally speaking, what these guys will do is they'll just alternate. They'll just spam these abilities and they'll alternate back and forth between the two. So one way or another, you're going to have to deal with these guys. The good news is, both the Shadow Bolt Volley and the Arcane Explosion have a cast time. And so both abilities can be interrupted. So the reason why I said these mobs have marks on them is because you want to assign interrupts to each one of the Acolytes. So you can assign kicks, you can assign pummels, you can assign counter spells, whatever you want. Earth Shocks if you're Horde. Doesn't really matter who does it, but just make sure that you assign the interrupt. As long as you properly interrupt the Acolytes, you should never really take any damage from these. As long as the interrupts are on point, these guys are a joke. But if you do something like pull the Infectious Skitterers and then also pull like a Cultist and Acolyte pack at the same time, and all of a sudden it's unorganized and you don't know which target is whose, like if you haven't marked them in advance and you don't know, like, wait, shit, who am I interrupting? Then if they start spamming their abilities and nobody interrupts the Shadow Bolt Volley and Arcane Explosion, it can very quickly kill people. These guys are not stunnable, so no, you cannot nade them. I suppose I don't technically know about Arcane Bombs, but I don't think they're silenceable, so I don't think Arcane Bombs will do shit either. Don't use Arcane Bombs on these packs, please. So like I said, just assign interrupt targets, and they're mostly fine. So, like I was saying earlier, while the traditional strategy is to pull the Cultists and the Acolytes apart, in reality, as long as you assign interrupts properly, and as long as the Acolytes never get their abilities off. You can stack the Acolytes and the Cultists on top of each other. Just make sure the raid faces their back against a wall, so that when the Cultists do their knockback, they just get knocked back into a wall. You can stack all these up and AoE them down. Just number 1, make sure the interrupts are on point. Number 2, make sure that you're positioned properly so you don't get knocked back a significant chunk of distance. You're just knocked into a wall. As long as you do that, press your cleave buttons, press your AoE buttons. The good news is these guys don't have a ton of HP, so they will mostly instantly melt as long as you AoE all at the same time. So, if done improperly, these packs can be scary, but as long as people know how to interrupt, as long as those assignments are made in advance, this is very manageable. Keep in mind, you have to kill all 6 of these packs before you pull Faralina, because if you don't pull these guys before Faralina, they will social aggro with Faralina. So these are not skippable, sadly. What's the buff I have with 42 minutes? I'm assuming you're talking about my Dark Desire? Just the Valentine's hit food. Any Chads that'll pull all of them? Baker's tried it. We tried it. As far as I know, nobody was able to AoE them all down at the same time, but would it be possible maybe eventually with some fine tuning? Maybe. Wouldn't be easy though. Alright, so you can see Acolytes are casting. They're actually getting some Arcane Explosions off right there. Not ideal. And they spam this shit on the classic PTR, so I'd say probably more frequently than they did on this vanilla retail server right here. So make sure you interrupt. Now, these last few packs, you can just charge right into them. You don't have to pull all of them up like those first 3. You don't want to charge into the first few just because you don't want to social aggro the entire room, especially if knockbacks go out. But these last few, you can just run down and meet them. But, oh god, interrupt that Shuttle Bolt volley, please. You can see a lot of people are low on health all of a sudden because they just got hit by those volleys. I think I die here, right? Yeah. Interrupt, please, otherwise this will happen. Rip. I lost my Zanzapod, too, on this pull. That's tilting. I think this was my first death of this run, too. I think this was the last wing we did in this run. So, I'd made it up to this point without a single death. Ah. Can you Curse of Tongues the casters? I'm not sure, to be honest. Probably, but I don't think we tested it. To be honest, it's not really worth the GCD to Curse of Tongues them, just interrupt instead. Yeah, I agree, Dras. That was the other thing. You guys came close, but couldn't quite AoE all these down at the same time. But then we all had the 100% damage buff. So yeah, in reality, if you're doing half the damage that we were doing on the PTR, AoEing these all down will... I'm not going to say it's impossible, but... it would require creativity, that's for sure. I can't think of an immediately obvious way to AoE them all down off the top of my head, even if there is potentially possibly a way that somebody might figure out eventually. All right, and now it's time for Faralina. Freza, buddy, can you get res there? Here we are. Okay, Faralina. Good view of this right here. Faralina is another fight where it's going to be the boss and adds at the start of the fight. So you got Faralina, she's the one in the middle right here. And then you're going to have 6 adds that come along with her. 2 of them are going to be Naxx it's going to be Naxx followers, and 4 of them will be Naxx worshippers. This is something I was saying incorrectly, by the way, when people are asking me this question. I was told, and I just assumed this was correct by other people in Guild, that Faralina was showing up as undead on the PTR. But I went back and checked my own PTR recording, and she is most certainly a humanoid. I don't know what the fuck people were talking about in Guild, like, oh no, she's undead for sure. Her ads, her followers were always humanoids. That's what people were saying, and they are in fact humanoids. But Faralina herself is also a humanoid on the PTR, so... there are 2 bosses in the entirety of Naxx that are not undead. It is Faralina, and it is Makesna. Keep in mind, this was not my character, by the way, on this vanilla retail server for the vast majority of its existence, so I got what I worked with what I had, alright? It wasn't ideal, but yes, I was rocking the Chad hammers at least. So, because Faralina is humanoid, it means that if you're a mage out there, don't be equipping your undead cleansing set for this. If you're a tryhard using your consecrated sharpening stones, in theory, if your consecrated sharpening stone is about to expire, then put on a elemental sharpening stone instead. If you're a paladin out there, like, unfortunately, you can't use all of your super cool undead abilities. Blah, blah, you get it. So, when you pull this boss, you're going to aggro Faralina and all of her adds. Before you pull, it is not the worst idea to pre-pop a greater fire protection potion for this fight. And if you really hate gold, you could consider pre-popping a GNPP as well. If you're the dad guild that's sitting there for 10 minutes, like, okay guys, here we go. We're gonna discuss the pull now for 3 hours before we actually pull the boss. If you have nothing better to do during that time, you can pre-pop your protection potions. They're not vital. They're certainly not required for this fight, but they help. So if you're in the dad boomer guild trying to give yourself the best possible chance to kill Faralina for the first time, fire and nature are the 2 protection potions that can help you out. Okay, so you can see these guys have been marked in a specific way. These 2 right here, it's a little hard to tell, but the skull mark and the X mark right here are the 2 followers, and then the other 4 that are marked are the followers. When you pull Faralina, you don't want to kill all of these. You want to kill the followers, so skull, X. Those are going to be your prio targets at the start of the fight. So it's the guy wearing like the white robe. The worshippers, however, you're going to want to assign off tanks to these guys, or at least to a couple of these guys, just to make sure they're not running around during the fight doing whatever. But you don't want to kill them. And I'll get to why in a second. But the followers, generally speaking, you'll have your tanks pick up the followers, pull the followers out. Like, don't AoE them down with the worshippers, please. I'm dumb here. I don't know why I tossed dynamite, but I am not a smart man. Don't attack the worshipper. Attack the follower. There we go. And nuke these guys down. The followers are just a joke. They don't really have any sort of notable mechanic that you really have to worry about. They do have one mechanic, technically. They have a random charge, so they'll pick a random target in the raid and just charge them. And as soon as they charge, they'll just run right back to their top threat target. But the charge does, what is it, like 300 damage, 300 physical damage to whoever they charge, and knocks you down briefly. So it's not something you actually have to worry about. It's just annoying if you get charged. But for the most part, if you're a tank that's assigned to tanking the followers, just clump them together and cleave them down at the start of the fight. They're gonna melt. I think they only have like 100k HP or something, so they're gonna die within like literally 5 or 6 seconds. Rip TRS, by the way. You hate to see it. And then once those 2 followers are dead, then you can start DPSing the boss. So you're gonna go onto Faralina right here, and boom, you start nuking. Now, Faralina really has 3 notable mechanics that you'll have to worry about throughout the fight. The first one being, as you can probably see right here, a Rain of Fire. This Rain of Fire is just like the Rain of Fire you'd have to deal with on like Gehennis, for example, in MC. It's just going to be a Rain of Fire that starts in a random spot, like picks a random player in the room and starts casting on top of that person. It's pretty simple. Don't stand in fire. I'd like to think we all know that in this game by now, but just in case you haven't gotten it through your head at this point, up to this point in Naxx, first of all, I don't know how you've made it this far, but don't stand in fire, please. So if the Rain of Fire starts on you, the tank, if it's on top of the melee, just move it out of the Rain of Fire. If you're range DPS, just move out of the Rain of Fire. If you're melee DPS, follow the tank and move out of the Rain of Fire. Not that hard. Now, the Rain of Fire is the reason why you can pre-pop a GFPP. So if you have insanely slow reaction time, the GFPP will help give you a little buffer there. Yeah, fire is bad, I know. More news at 10. And you don't want to just ignore the Rain of Fire. It does slap if you just stand in it, hence why you don't want to stand in it. It does about 1850 to 2150 fire damage every 2 ticks. So don't sit there the entire fight just like, oh no, the healers will top me up. Like, no, if you stand in it too long, yes, it will kill you. Okay, that, honestly, not that scary. I think we can all agree it's not that hard to just move out of fire. The next mechanic she has is her Poison Bolt Volley. So you can see, if you look at the debuffs on the raid, you're going to see some people with these poison debuffs on them. This is very similar, myself included, I guess. This is very similar to Vicidus's Poison Bolt Volley. So for those that are unfamiliar, Viscidus does a Poison Bolt volley that hits everybody around him. And Fairlena's, I can't remember if on Classic it targets everybody in the raid or just a limited number of targets. But it's going to choose at least a decent portion of the raid to Poison Bolt volley. And so just like Viscidus, the Poison Bolt volley does upfront damage, so it's going to do about 1.3 to 1.5k nature damage up front when it hits you. And then it will also put a poison dot on you, just like this one right here. That will take for an additional about like 450 damage or so for every 2 seconds. And it lasts like 8 seconds, so it's going to take like 4 times for an additional total of like 1800 damage. So you can handle it the same way that you do the Viscidus poison. It's less of a big deal than the Viscidus poison. Don't be scared like, oh my god, it's going to be as hard as Viscidus. Like, no, but like you deal with it the same way. Shamans, just drop Poison Cleansing Totem. Alliance, just single target cleanse. Heal up the people that get hit by the poison, and it's not that big of a deal. This is the reason why pre-popping at GNPP for this fight is in theory an option if you want to. Like I said, I wouldn't actually do it unless you really hate gold, just because it's not really necessary to save your life on this fight. But if you're having a hard time on Fairlena and you just need that like tiny extra little bit of help, then pre-popping a GNPP might help. Okay. And then perhaps the most notable mechanic she has is this last one I'm about to mention here, and it's her Enrage. Let's see if it happens at some point during this fight. You can see the Enrage timer here on my screen. Okay, move out of fire, tough mechanics. By the way, you can see this entire time, the Worshippers are still just chilling here. They've been off tank this entire time for a reason. All right, so the Enrage actually never goes off this fight, so we're using the... There's 2 ways to do this fight. I'll get to that in a second, but I'll talk about what happens if you let this timer expire and the Enrage just happens, okay? So periodically throughout the fight, she's going to cast her Enrage spell, or her Enrage ability. This ability she can cast pretty much at the start of the fight. It's like, it's not a guarantee that she'll cast it at the start of the fight, but the window for the Enrage to start begins as soon as Fairlena is pulled. And it's a pretty typical Enrage in that it just means the boss is going to start attacking a hell of a lot faster and hit a hell of a lot harder. So the actual ability makes her attack 75% faster and increases her physical damage done by 150. So when she enrages, she's gonna slap the main tank. Don't underestimate the fact that it's just some like random ass chick with a sword. When she's enraged, she's gonna chunk the hell out of the main tank. Not to the point where the main tank is unhealable, but to the point where the healers are gonna have to spam the main tank, and that's not sustainable for the entire fight. And keep in mind, the Enrage will stay on the entire fight if it's not removed. So the question is, okay, well then how do you remove the Enrage? And that is where the Worshippers come in. This is why you've kept the Worshippers alive this entire time, is to deal with the Enrage. So the Worshippers, like everybody always thinks of the mind control fight in Naxx being Resuvius. And while that's true, you heavily rely on mind control during that fight. You also rely on mind control for this fight as well. So priests, not only do you have to deal with mind control on Resuvius, it's also your turn to step up on Fairlena as well. The real question is, can you dual wield the Enrage just fine? I will get to why that's not really a relevant question here in a second. And yes, she still hits relatively hard when she's not enraged. She's gonna melee tanks for like 1.3 to 1.8k or so when she's not enraged, which is not insignificant. But yeah, when she is enraged, she's gonna start hitting the tank for like 2.2 to 2.5k and significantly faster. So the way you deal with the Enrage is you have priests mind control the Worshippers. The tradition, I'm going to tell you about the traditional way this fight is done, and I'll talk about the way that you should do this fight in 2020 with the DPS we have in 2020. So the traditional way to do this is to assign an off tank to each one of the Worshippers at the start of the fight. So just assign an off tank to all 4 Worshippers and just tank them off to the side during the fight. The good news is the Worshippers, as far as their mechanics are concerned, they have none. You just tank them off to the side, and they do nothing besides just slap you with auto attacks the whole time until something happens. They don't have any threat drops. They don't have anything fancy that makes them hard to off tank. And what you can do is when the enrage starts, a priest can mind control the worshiper. And when you mind control the worshiper, they have one ability and one ability only, and it's called sacrifice. So if you take the worshiper and you cast the sacrifice ability, you can run it over to Faralina and cast sacrifice. What that's going to do is it will kill the worshiper. You know, they're sacrificing themselves. And if Faralina is enraged, it will cancel the enrage. And Faralina's enrage has a 60-second cooldown. So basically what the traditional strategy is when an enrage happens, you mind control a worshiper, you go over to Faralina, you cast sacrifice, you cancel the enrage, and now she can't enrage for another 60 seconds. Cool. It also will silence her poison bolt ability for 30 seconds as well. So realistically, the poison bolt volley isn't a mechanic you actually have to worry about during this fight. And that's kind of why, to be honest, during this fight, it's kind of a waste to pre-pop GNPP, because if done properly and if the priest mind controllers know what they're doing, you should probably never get hit by a single poison bolt volley anyways. But at least initially when your priests are learning the fight, you know, you might take a few here and there. Okay, so this traditional boomer strat of only mind controlling the worshiper and then stopping the enrage on Faralina for 60 seconds assumed really shitty levels of raid DPS to the point where there's only four worshipers. And so if the worshiper can stop the enrage each for 60 seconds, that would give you in theory 4 minutes in total to kill the boss. Because there's four worshipers, right? And when you sacrifice, it kills a worshiper, so you can do that 4 times and stop the enrage 4 times for a minute. Once you run out of worshipers, then in theory, Faralina will enrage again, and she's going to start slapping the main tank to the point where it was essentially back in the day a DPS race, because it was a race to kill Faralina before you ran out of worshipers. Now, in reality, in 2020, are we really going to be worried about killing Faralina within 4 minutes? No. She has 1.33 million HP. So for context, like Flame Gore, like I said before, has about 1 million. So it's going to be a slightly longer fight than Flame Gore. I'd like to think that most skills nowadays have enough raid DPS to kill Faralina in far less than 4 minutes. So, because of that, the 2020 strategy that I will actually suggest you use is the following. What you're going to want to do is assign probably either 3 or maybe even just 2 tanks to 2 of the worshippers at the start of the fight. So assign 2 off tanks to the followers, assign 2 off tanks to the 2 worshippers. The other 2 worshippers, just have your priests open with mind control. Don't even bother waiting for the enrage. Just have the priest open with mind control, and then as soon as the priest opens with mind controls and gets one of the worshippers, just immediately sacrifice it. Even if Faralina is not enraged, if you just immediately use the sacrifice ability on Faralina, it's going to prevent her from enraging for 30 seconds. So it's like if you do it after the enrage started, it stops her from enraging for 60 seconds. If you do it before the enrage, it only stops it for 30. But in reality, if you have 4 worshippers to work with and you just cast those sacrifices back to back to back to back to back, that gives you 2 minutes still of no enrage timing, right? 30 seconds for all 4. The vast majority of guilds out there will be capable of killing Faralina within 2 minutes. So don't worry about the enrage, trying to prolong the enrage. Just make sure you can just ensure she never enrages at all. So you'll see your enrage timer on the screen like this, like you're seeing right here. So if you're the priest that's mind controlling a worshipper, as right before this timer ends, just cast a new sacrifice on her so that that way you can overlap them. And that ensures that A, you'll never get a poison bolt volley, and B, she'll never enrage throughout the entire fight. So I wouldn't really recommend anybody use the traditional strategy at this point. Anybody who's incapable of killing Faralina in 2 minutes will certainly not be able to will kill Saffron later on, so you might not want to even bother. As you can see, she dies fairly quickly here, so we did in fact use the non-boomer strat of just overlapping the 30-second enrage preventions. And boom, she dies. So, really, this fight just relies on your priests. knowing the timing. It's not hard timing to get down. You just sacrifice every 30 seconds. If you wipe on Farolina a few times, it's probably because the priest fucked up and accidentally maybe sacrificed 2 of the worshippers at the same time or something. Like they didn't coordinate it well. Otherwise, Farolina is not a tough fight in 2020. And yes, we got the Widow's Remorse. Wow, very exciting. What's the hardest boss in Naxx, in my opinion? Based on last night's PTR, it is Saffron, and it is not even close. Saffron will be by far the hardest fight in that raid. Alright, cool. You know, by the way, this was the server first clear that you're watching right here. I'm watching this back and I'm like, damn, we were taking our sweet time, weren't we? We weren't really in that much of a rush to get server first, apparently, but we still got it, somehow. Do I still have my .lua file for scrolling combat text? Yes, !MSBT in the chat. Oh, that was a abrupt transition of songs. Keep in mind, if you want to hear my full explanation as to what was going on with Saffron, I talked about it at the start of this stream, so you can watch the VOD later on. I spent a good 30 minutes talking about the Frostwing PTR before I started this guide right here. I'm gonna stick to talking about the Spiderwing for now. If you guys have any questions about the Frostwing PTR stuff and just anything having to do with any other question besides the Spiderwing, I'll still be streaming after I'm done with the guide here, so you can ask questions after this this little section's over right now. Okay. Moving on. So now that we killed Farolina, now this little web gate that would have previously been blocking our way in this section right here, like the gate would have been right here in this little opening. Now it's closed. Now we can run through and continue on our merry way. Cool. So one thing that's interesting, I think we did a skip in this section. That's why you saw us hesitating right here. I don't even know why we did this skip, because frankly, we sat here for so long that I doubt we even saved any time. This is actually kind of pointless looking back on this, but we're going to do a little mini skip here. There's a pack that would be standing right here. So wait, hold on. Why am I looking this direction? This is silly. Anyways. Okay, so there's a pack that would be standing right here that we used a hunter to pull and skip. I don't know why. Like I said, we're literally skipping one pack and it's not a hard pack. So yeah, exactly, drastic. Maybe this pack was harder on private servers, and I don't remember this, but yeah, in reality, don't skip this pack. It's a joke. Just melt it immediately. All right, so here they come back. The good news is the second pack we're going to fight here is the same as the first one. So I'll just talk about this pack and know that you're going to have to fight 2 of these packs, one of which we skipped here, but like you're going to fight this one and the one before it. All right, so what you're fighting here are going to be 4 of the Dread Creepers, the same Dread Creepers that we fought at the start of the wing. So like in those first few packs that we fought at the very start, same ones. And then it's also going to come with 1 Tomb Horror, so the giant looking like Anubisat, or not Anubisat, what are those mobs called again? The Nerubian looking mobs, those. Hey, what's up, Sweatpants Zach, coming in hot with that Twitch Prime sub now for 4 months? No problem, dude. Your sub will go directly to the Hot Pockets and Doritos Fund. Okay, so the Dread Creepers, for those that don't remember, are just the mobs that do the Veil of Shadow, the thing that reduces the healing on you. Once again, that's the only mechanic they have. Not scary. Just make sure that your decursors prio the main tanks here. Just decurse the tanks so you can heal them. I wouldn't even bother decursing the DPS on this, because as long as they're not gorillas, then they shouldn't die here anyways. So nuke down the Dread Creepers first. You can just stack these up, cleave, and AoE them down. These packs are hilariously easy on Classic based on what we saw in the PTR, so you can see we're actually taking a decent chunk of damage here, and it's not going to happen on Classic, I promise. This is probably why we skipped the first pack here on this server right here, just because I think the Tomb Horrors actually had some extra mechanics on this special private, not private, retail server that we played on. That they're not going to have in Classic. So don't worry about all this raid damage that we're taking here on this pull. You're not going to see this actually happen on Classic. Yes, that's correct, Ihata. You got the gist. All right, so you kill the Dread Creepers. Taking 9 years to kill them. Taking a bunch of damage from mechanics that you won't see in Classic, so don't worry about it. All right, and the Tomb Horror was dead. I guess the range were taking care of the Tomb Horror. Well, that's underwhelming. All right, in reality, you don't actually have to do that in live. You can have melee do them too. So, the only thing I'll talk about with the Tomb Horror, they have one mechanic on Classic and one mechanic only. They're actually it's actually kind of hilarious how much of a joke they are. They are going to hit tanks fairly hard. They'll melee a tank for like 1.4 to 1.7k on Classic or so. Literally the only ability they were doing in Classic was an ability called Pointy Spike. It's just a physical ability with a cast time, so almost like a slam or something. In fact, it's exactly like a slam. It's just called Pointy Spike instead. It's a special physical attack that once it's cast does about 1.5k-ish damage to tanks, but just physical damage once again. Nothing that can't be healed through. So in reality, on Classic, you can just stack up these Dread Creepers and the Tomb Horror on top of each other and just AoE them and cleave them down. They're a non-issue. I think on this Classic retail server right here, they were casting like a bunch of Crypt Scarabs and it had like a bunch of AoE bugs that they would spawn or something, like a whole bunch of silliness that we didn't see on the PTR. So unlike here, unlike this pull, just stack everything up, AoE them down, beat your head against the keyboard until they're dead. It's easy. Just block it. It doesn't really matter. It's a hilarious joke of a mechanic that on a tank does almost no damage anyways. But damn, watching this VOD, no wonder we skipped one of those packs. These packs slapped on this server. So they don't have curses on live? No, well the curses are being cast, keep in mind, by the Dread Creepers. They were being cast by these small spiders. And those absolutely do have the curse. Okay, now, this next section right here is going to have a bunch of trash that you'll watch us do, and I'll talk about each one of these trash pulls just for thoroughness. In reality, a large portion of this room you're about to watch us do right here, you're just going to be able to skip, and frankly, you will have no reason not to skip. In fact, on this run right here, I'm not even sure why we did bother with killing this stuff right here, but anyways, let's watch it just in case. So, first things first, we're playing one of these Spirits of Naxx. I am not going to talk about this too much, the Spirit of Naxx and its mechanics. Number one, because we'll see them later again in the Death Knight Wing. And in the Death Knight Wing, there's a greater chance of you actually having to fight these instead of in the Spider Wing here, where you really have no reason to actually kill it. And number two, well, actually, yeah, those were the two reasons. We'll see it later in the Death Knight Wing, so I'll explain it then. And in this specific wing, you can just skip it anyways. Either way, they're not that scary. You can stun them. You're just going to melt them anyway, so it doesn't really matter regardless. And by the way, this section right here, like, so basically everything between Fairlina and Makesna is going to be the undead portion of the Spider Wing. So this is where like all your plus undead damage stuff is still going to be useful in this specific wing. Yeah, they spawn ghosts, blah, 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 blah. These are just like the ghosts that you'd see inside the bat section of ZG. Just don't get hit by the ghost. Don't touch the spooky ghost and you'll be fine. Kind of like I did there. Don't do that. All right, so next thing up, you're gonna have these packs of 4 plagued ghouls. They weren't summoning on the PTR? Okay. I wouldn't know, we just skipped them on the PTR, but sure, okay, cool. They didn't summon ghosts. Awesome. So, the Plagued Ghouls are pretty much identical to the ghouls that we fought back in the Plague Wing. So if you guys watched the previous Plague Wing guide, I went over these ghouls, and these mobs, technically they're called different. Like the ones you fight in the Plague Wing are called Infectious Ghouls, and these are called Plagued Ghouls, but in reality, they're literally identical. They do the exact same mechanics, have the exact same HP. So to go over briefly what these guys do again is they're mostly just tank and spank. They're mostly just all physical damage that you have to worry about. They have a single target Ren debuff that they'll put on their main target. It ticks for an entire 97 damage per tick per second. somehow I think your healers can manage. And they'll also do a single target disease called Flesh Rot that it just inflicts periodic physical damage of like, I think it's like 555 to 645 damage every 2 seconds for 12 seconds. It's a disease, so you can cleanse it, but in reality, it doesn't matter anyways. It's a negligible amount of damage that can very, very easily be healed through. The only thing you really have to worry about on these guys is that they do enrage when they're below 50% health. So they're going to start, or not enrage, frenzy, but same thing. They're just going to start attacking faster and hit harder. So you do have to be careful as a DPSer on these Plague Ghouls, because once they enrage, don't be Lilane here. Yes, by the way, this is the same Lilane as Calamity Lilane. It's safe to say he had a rough run. He died quite a few times in this run. Don't be Lilane and just immediately run in, because these ghouls do hit relatively hard. So if you just immediately rip threat here as a DPS warrior, you can kill yourself. So don't do that, please. And you especially don't really want to rip threat in these guys after they enrage if you're not a tank. Because if you're in Zerker stance as a DPS warrior, for example, and you rip threat when they're enraged, you can get chunked to the point where you might just insta-die if you're not topped up. So don't do that, please. As long as you are not a gorilla, let your tanks tank this. Just stack them up, cleave them down. On this special vanilla server, like from retail back in the day, for whatever reason, they also had a chain cleave, like these ghouls had a chain cleave, so that made it scarier and put more AoE damage on the melee. That is not the case from what we saw in the classic PTR, so they're pretty much just easy tank and spanks. So there is no downside to stacking them up. Any mob/bosses that need to be hunter tranked in Naxx? Yes, Gluth. But we'll get to that eventually when we do the A-bomb wing. Okay. Next pull is just 2 more Necrostalkers. These are the same guys that we saw before, right before Farolina. They have the poison charge thing again. Realistically, just stack them up, cleave them down. You'll get another pair of Necrostalkers here. You can see that was a poison charge right there. Everybody gets a poison. Shaman press their poison cleansing totem button, and the poisons disappear. Easy. Okay. And then more of these Plague Ghouls. So while you see us fighting all of these mobs, like I said before, I'm not really sure why we did, to be honest, because in reality, you can skip almost this entire section. Like everything we just fought, like just the last 4 pulls you just saw us do, we didn't actually have to do. What you can do instead is when you come through this little doorway and you cross this little bridge right here that we're on right now, instead of pulling everything that's in this section right here, what you can do is just jump down here to the left side and just go through this little trench. See if I get a better POV of it at some point. See if I turn to the left at any point. Come on, Poggy. Buddy. Okay, it's probably going to be hard to tell at any point during this POV, but... Well, okay, that was actually a pretty good example right there. Needing a repair bot. Yikes. Okay, so... You can see this little trench down here. If you jump off the bridge down into this trench, you can either hug the wall on the left side, or you can just hug this little slope here on the right side, and you'll be out of LOS of all these mobs that are walking around up here. As long as you just run down here and hug the trench, you can just run all the way along this to this back wall over here, and just run up the little slope here, turn the corner, and keep going. All these Necrostalkers you just saw us fight, all these ghouls you just saw us just fight, the Spirit of Naxxramas especially, you can just walk right past all of it. I don't know what Warcraft logs will eventually require as far as a speedrun requirement's concerned, but if you're not concerned about getting your juicy Naxx speedrun in and you just want to get to Makesna as fast as possible, I would say, certainly with the Necrostalkers, you don't really have to bother with these if you don't want to. Just jump off this bridge, left side, hug the trench, and skip it all. Not saying you have to, but it's an option if you want to. Would I say more of a tryhard now than I was in this video? Probably not. I went pretty hard on private servers too. I mean, I guess you could argue that maybe I continue to get even sweatier over the course of time, but I certainly was not what I'd call a casual player even back at this time right here. Okay, so anyways, moving on. Now we approach this next little section right here. Warcraft logs probably won't require this stuff. You say that, but then you go back and look at AQ40 and the requirements for that, and then you realize that they required you to kill everything in AQ40, even stuff you could walk past. So I wouldn't be so confident about that. So next two mobs right here, these are not skippable. These are going to be Naxx Acolytes. What do they call this? It might be Necro something Acolytes. What's the actual name of these guys? It's very important that you know the exact name. Necropolis Acolytes. There you go. These guys are just going to fall over. These guys are just going to evaporate. So in reality, these are not, as long as you deal with these guys properly, they're not really something that you're going to have to worry about too heavily. But they do have one notable ability, and that's going to be their Shadow Bolt volleys. No, two notable abilities, sorry. They're going to alternate between two spell-casted abilities. They have Shadow Bolt volleys, and they have Arcane Explosions. The Shadow Bolt volleys are going to hit basically everybody in range, or everybody just in the raid in general, for about 700 to 1,000 damage per person. And then they'll Arcane Explosion anybody within about 10 yards and hit them for 600 to 700 arcane damage. Traditionally, for shitty guilds, like back in retail, what you would do is you'd separate these guys so that way you don't get hit by both Arcane Explosions when they cast it, and like you do one by one. In reality, with how fast these guys will die, just stack them on top of each other and cleave them down. You can see they have very little HP, so you can just melt them. So yeah, you're going to take some AoE damage, but it's nothing that Prayer of Healing or Chain Heal can't top up very quickly over the course of like the 5 or 6 seconds that they'll actually be alive. Not much to talk about there. Those guys are a joke. Okay. Next section, you're going to have to deal with these Plagued Gargoyles. Just like we dealt with ghouls that were basically identical to the ghouls from the Plague Wing a little bit before, these gargoyles are also going to be pretty much identical to the gargoyles we fought back in the Plague Wing. So exact same abilities. They're the ones that will do the periodic stacking dot on you that does like acid, what's the actual ability called? Acid Volley. And so you'll see yourself take these stacks right here. And so these are just the acid volleys that are non-dispellable and are going to do nature damage over time. And if eventually you get enough stacks, this can become scary. Like if you get 10 stacks, then at that point it'd be ticking on you for something like, I think it'd be 1,300 to 1,500 damage every 2 seconds, every 2 or 3 seconds or so. The reason why I'm not sure about the exact amount is in reality, you're never going to get, you're going to be able to kill these guys fast enough to the point where you're not going to get enough stacks to be in danger. If you happen to pull the other pack, like the other pair of Plagued Gargoyles that patrols in that little area up there, and if you do 4 at once, it might get scary. But in reality, just stack these two on top of each other and cleave them down. The only other ability is the same one that they had from the Plague Wing. When they get low in health, they'll start casting their Stone Skin ability that casts for 6 seconds. And if you don't kill them, they cast it at 30%, and if you don't kill them when they're sub 30% within 6 seconds and they finish their cast of the Stone Skin, then they regenerate back to full health, which in theory could be dangerous because then you take more acid stacks eventually to the point where you might be in danger. But just make sure that once they get below 30%, make sure you don't just ignore them. Make sure once they're below 30%, you definitely kill them because you don't want them regenerating to full health because that's really the only way to make these guys dangerous. Is if you let them regen back to full health again. But as long as you just focus them down once they're low health, 6 seconds is an eternity that you can kill them within. Now, traditionally, and maybe some for more average casual guilds, what you might want to do is focus down one first and then the other, just so that way you can nuke them down as fast as possible below 30%. In reality, I would tell you that most guilds will be capable of just cleaving them at the same time, and you can just cleave them down both under 30% within 6 seconds just fine. I'll let you specifically in your guild out there in Twitch chat, you just sitting there watching, figure it out yourself. But with 2020 levels of raid DPS, it's not that bad. Does a lip prevent the debuff from implying? I guess it should in theory, but I wouldn't bother burning a lip on these guys. Unless you get to the point where you're up to like 10 or 12 stacks, you're not really in danger of dying. It's not like it's an unhealable amount of damage if you have 3 or 4 stacks. And frankly, as a warrior, it's not the worst thing in the world to have a few stacks, more rage. Just saying. Okay. And the entire rest of this section here is just going to be more of the same. Those were all the unique mob types in the Spider Wing, and the rest of what we're going to fight here through the rest of this portion right here are just going to be the same stuff that we've already seen. So I'm probably going to skip ahead a little bit. Once again, you can end up skipping a lot of the stuff that you're going to see us fight right here. When we go up this ramp, it's 2 more of the Acolytes. You're going to have to kill these. Those will not be skippable. So same Acolytes as before, Shadow Bolt Volleys, Arcane Explosions. Just nuke them down. If you're really worried about the damage you're going to take, you can separate them, but I don't think most people will have to worry about separating them. And then more of the Plagued Ghouls. Mostly just tank and spanks, just stack them up, cleave them down. Don't be dumb and kill yourself like Lilane, that's really the only thing that matters. Okay, now just like that previous section where I talked about how you could skip a lot of the stuff or most of the stuff, you can do the exact same thing by just hugging the left side here and just running along this trench on the left side. If you just run along this way, all the ghouls that patrol up here can just be LOS'd by being down here in this trench. And you just run all the way to this back wall, hug the wall over here, turn the corner, and just continue on your merry way. Unless you're really desperate for Naxx trash drops and you're just trying to clear all the Naxx trash for 8D rep or something, like, there's really not a reason you have to kill these guys. Like the Spirit of Naxxramas, for example, once again, literally no reason to kill this guy if you don't want to. We did it here. I don't even know why we bothered with this, but we did, I guess, just for thoroughness sake, so that way people in Warcraft logs are going to accuse us of being cheaters. Of course, of course. This is old Calamity? Well, I mean, it's kind of funny. If anything, I would say Calamity is the new Vanguard, but yes, I suppose they're largely one and the same. Not identical, like the leadership of Calamity is not the same leadership as Vanguard, but... Wait, the leadership of Calamity is not the same leadership as Vanguard, there we go. But it does have quite a few of the same players. Alright, we are getting dangerously close to Makesna at this point. Should have a pair of Acolytes left, I think one more pack of Ghouls, and I think we're at Makesna. So as you can see, there's a non-negligible amount of trash in this Spider Wing. It's not like excessive, it's not like so much trash that it's going to take you half an hour just between each boss. I mean, it might take some guilds that much, but for the most part, it's more trash than you'll have to deal with than pretty much in any other wing, but at the same time, it's nowhere near the difficulty or annoyingness of like post-Twin M's trash, so you're not going to see guilds get hard stuck on trash at any point. Like, it's the bosses that are the toughest part of Naxx. It is not the trash like you can say for AQ40. Alright. And now we move to the final boss in the Spider Wing. This is one of the few bosses I can say confidently is definitely a she. I guess we'll move on to Makesna. There she is. There she is, alright. Funny thing about Makesna is, as far as the final wing bosses in Naxx are concerned, she is one of, if not the easiest. I would argue that maybe only Thaddeus is an easier final wing boss than Makesna is, yet Makesna drops a lot of god tier loot. So everybody's always excited to kill Makesna because like, ooh, could drop Kiss the Spider, could drop Wraithblade, oh shit. Alright, so, Makesna. Makesna is a boss with 1.5 million HP, so once again to put things into context, Flamegore having 1 million, Makesna does not have that much health. She only has 50% more health than Flamegore. So most guilds are not going to take too long to kill this boss, but naturally she does have more mechanics that you're going to have to deal with compared to something like Flamegore. For this fight, it's not the worst idea to pre-pop a G and PP. You are going to take some guaranteed nature damage at some point throughout the fight. It's certainly by no means necessary to pre-pop a G and PP, but once again, if you're struggling on this boss and you're just like, you're so close to killing it, but you can't quite do it, it's not the worst idea to pre-pop a G and PP if you want to. I will tell you that you'll never see me pre-pop a G and PP for this fight personally, but your results might vary. And then another thing to note about Makesna on Classic specifically, which you're not going to see in this VOD right here, is her hitbox is enormous. I don't know the exact range of her hitbox, but it felt like you could hit her from like 30 yards away. Like I would say right here on the Classic PTR, if you've got Makesna targeted and your auto attack's turned on, you can hit Makesna from right here as a melee. So you'll have plenty of room to work with, I guess, as a melee. You don't have to stack directly underneath her like you would on this special Classic vanilla retail server right here. So what you're going to want to do on Makesna when you pull her is you're going to pull her to the northeast side of the room. So when a tank goes in, have the tank initially drag it back. So just like this right here, okay? So you're going to have the tank pull it, just body pull it, whatever, and then drag it in this direction over here, and then turn the boss around so it's facing away from the raid. So he pulls it in this direction, Makesna is following him. Come on, Prowse, come on. Attaboy. And then once the boss is in position on the northeastern portion of the room, then the tank runs through it and turns it around, and then the entire raid will run around behind the boss like so. And this is how you're going to fight the boss for the rest of the encounter. So Makesna in the northeast side of the room, facing towards about the center of the room, and then the rest of the raid directly behind her. There's really nothing scary as long as you're behind the boss about stacking like right on top of the boss. So regardless of whether you're ranged or a melee, you want to be pretty close to behind the boss, like directly behind the boss. And I will get to why in a second, but there's no like AoE cleaves or AoE abilities that are going to hit you if you're standing right here. So this is completely safe to stand in as a healer or a caster, and there's a reason why you're going to want to do it. Okay, so Makesna has quite a few mechanics that you are going to have to at least be wary of during this encounter. Number one, this boss does hit fairly hard even before her little enrage later on in the fight. Did I say northeast? I'm sorry, yeah, I've saying northeast this entire time. My bad. I'm talking about northwest. Yeah. Okay, so Makesna, even before her enrage, will hit the tank pretty hard, so you got to make sure that the healers, like you're on the ball, you don't just ignore the tank for 10 seconds or anything like that. Makesna's just going to auto-attack tanks for anywhere between 1.4 to 2k damage every 2 seconds or so-ish. The good news is, like, the main tank, at least during this portion of the fight, is pretty much the only person to take damage, so as long as healers are focusing the main tank, it's not like it's hard to keep the main tank up, but just keep it in mind during later portions of the fight. Alright, so the first thing you're going to have to worry about in this fight is the web wrap mechanic. Unfortunately, this is kind of a shitty VOD to show off what's going on here with the web wrap, because you just see this from my melee POV the entire time, and I don't get web wrapped during this fight. And so it's kind of hard to tell what exactly is going on. So we're going to go to the old school video. Take a look at the good old days and watch the curse video of them doing Makesna from back in the comfy retail days of 2005 or maybe 2006. We're going to see that. I'm assuming this guild at some point will, in fact, show off a pretty good example of what the web wrap looks like, because this is going to be from a ranged POV, okay? So you're fighting Makesna, once again, pulling her in the exact same fashion that you just saw in the VOD that we're watching right now. But then at some point, wait for it. Yeah, I know, sick UI, right? 2006 was a simpler time. Oh, let's get a web wrap at some point, please. Okay, well, that at least illustrated it. All right. Okay. It's a little hard to tell in the moment here, but watch this in slow-mo. All right, see this guy? He gets yeeted straight backwards. Just gonna go, pew! See ya, buddy. So what is happening here is the mechanic called web wrap. And periodically, this is going to happen throughout the fight. So it happens for the first time 20 seconds into the fight, and then after that initial application, every 40 seconds after that. So it's at a set interval each time. You can find a halfway decent picture of Makesna's room so I can give you an example of what I'm talking about here. These are all really shitty maps. Okay, this is terrible, but I think I'll just make do with what I got. All right, so we got the picture of all of Naxx. We don't need any of this. We just need the Makesna room, and that's it. So we're going to head over here. All right, so here's Makesna's room. So we're taking Makesna right here right now, right? What's going to happen during the web wrap is it's going to shoot 3 random people. It's going to pick 3 random people. The only person that cannot be selected is the main tank. It's going to knock 3 people up into the air and against this back wall. And they're going to be web wrapped against this back wall. So what's going to happen is when you hit the back wall, you get cocooned. You get this cocoon that's built around you. You're going to be this guy that's like struggling to get out of the cocoon. When you yourself are cocooned, you can do nothing. You're just stuck there. And when you get cocooned against that wall, you're going to take periodic nature damage the entire time. So you're going to take 650 to 850 nature damage per second while you are wrapped in this cocoon right here. And it happens indefinitely in theory until you die. You can be healed while you're in the cocoon, but you have no way of releasing yourself. You have no way of getting yourself out of the cocoon. You can't even petri it. We tried. There's nothing to get yourself out of this. The only way to get out of the cocoon is to rely on the rest of your raid to get you out. The rest of your raid is going to want to attack your cocoon, because like the cocoon is going to be a targetable mob, basically. And you'll be capable of attacking that cocoon mob and damaging it. And once you kill the cocoon, then the person inside the cocoon is released from it. He drops back down to the floor. He's safe. He can go back to DPSing the boss. The good news is these cocoons only have about 6k HP, so they're not hard to break. So whenever these go out, like 3 people get cocooned against the wall, just have the ranged DPS turn around and DPS them down. They definitely want to prio it. You don't, because like if later mechanics happen and people are still wrapped against the wall, then they might die. So just make sure as soon as the mechanic happens, and it's reliable, it's on a set timer, every 20 seconds into the fight and every 40 seconds after that. Just have the ranged DPS turn around, nuke it real quick. You can just kill the cocoons in 1 GCD and then continue going on your merry way against the boss. So yeah, hunters, mages, warlocks, just make sure you break the cocoons. I don't believe you can ice block it, no, and I don't believe you can bubble it either. I don't believe anything works on getting yourself out. It's just relying on the rest of your raid to kill your cocoon. But as long as people aren't completely brain dead and know to turn around real quick, it's not hard to kill the wraps, and you're not like going to instantly die or anything like that. Yeah, Desire CS, if you have a POV of it, then sure. Can you pre-vanish it? I have no idea, maybe. But I wouldn't recommend burning your vanish on the small chance you get cocooned. Alright, let's see. Okay, Monkey News has a POV. Sure, alright. So here's what happens. Cocoons go out. Now, Monkey News gets slapped against the back wall right here, and now he's just stuck up against this wall. He's wrapped up, so you can see, here we go. Oh, I'm struggling, shit, help me, oh my god, I can't breathe, blah, 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 blah. And so you can see projectiles flying towards the web wrap. It breaks, cool. He's released, he gets to go back onto the boss and continue on his merry way. Cool. Thanks for the POV. Perfect. No, you cannot DPS the web wrap yourself. You will be completely incapacitated while you yourself are web wrapped and you just sit there waiting for the rest of the raid to save you. How close are the 3 web wrap targets to each other? Not usually close enough to the point where you can chain heal them, but it doesn't... In reality, a healer probably isn't going to have to heal them anyways, because you'll break the wraps so quickly that like it's not going to be enough damage to the point where it gets scary. So as a healer, I wouldn't really prio them unless they're getting desperately low on health. I would ensure you keep the tank up first and foremost. And the web wrap does nature damage. All the damage you take on this fight besides physical. So basically the raid-wide damage you're going to take on this fight is going to be nature, which is why it's not the worst idea to pre-pop a GNPP on this fight. Is it necessary? No, but it's not the worst idea. All right, so web wrap, not a hard mechanic to deal with as long as you just don't ignore it. All right, next thing up is a poison shock, and that's just a mechanic that Makesna does that will cast on her highest threat target, so just on the tank. Poison shock is just it's a frontal cone of poison damage that she does, so it's kind of like a cone of cold, but a poison version of it. That will hit everybody in that frontal cone for 1750 nature damage if it's unmitigated. And she casts this ability about every 10 seconds or so. So as long as your main tank positions the boss facing away from the raid and nobody is standing in front of the boss besides the main tank, the only person that will ever get hit by this is the main tank, and it's not so much damage that it's impossible to heal through or anything. It's just like, it's 1750, just extra damage. So as a healer, make sure you know ideally when this is going to go out, or about the time when it's going to go out if you want to get a bit more burst healing on the tank. But for the most part, like I said, as long as you face the boss away, this is a non-issue throughout the fight. Okay. Next one to worry about is the necrotic poison. You can probably see the timer here on the screen of the necrotic poison. This one is definitely something you're gonna have to worry about, especially through certain portions of the fight. Necrotic poison is basically just like the Veil of Shadows on Neff. So Neff will cast the Veil of Shadows on the main tank. That reduces the healing on the main tank. The necrotic poison, when it casts on your main tank, will reduce the healing on that player by 90%. So basically it makes the target almost impossible to heal. So as the name would imply, it's a poison. So unlike on Neff where you have to decurse the Veil of Shadows, on Naxx now you have to depoison the tank as soon as this goes out. So you're capable of continuing to heal the main tank. So the good news is there's going to be a set timer on it. It's not hard to tell to see when it's coming. So just make sure that you insta cleanse this. As long as you cleanse it ASAP, you'll be fine. But it's going to get a little bit more complicated here in a second when it comes to this necrotic poison. That doesn't make it quite as simple as Neff's Veil of Shadows. All right. 30 seconds into the fight. So 20 seconds you get the cocoons, and then 10 seconds after the cocoons you're going to get the mini spiderling spawns. Elixir of Poison resistance would work, sure. But I don't really think the main tank really wants to prio using Elixir of Poison resistance. I mean, he can if he wants to, but the necrotic poison gets scary for one reason later on. I'll tell you why, and for that purpose, Elixir of Poison resistance won't help. I'll talk about this in a second, though. Okay, so 30 seconds of the fight, you're going to get a bunch of these little Naxx spiderlings. These are just like little tiny spiders that spawn that you just AoE down. They don't have any special mechanics. They don't have any sort of special abilities that are going to make them scary. It's just like Vecnus borers spawning. So when they spawn, just everybody press their AoE buttons. Melee and Sapper, mages. This is kind of the reason why I was talking about you want to have all the DPS stack up on the back of the boss right here. While in theory there's no requirement to be close to the boss during this fight as a caster or as a melee, because you can stand in theory a million miles away from Naxx and still hit her. You want to stand underneath the boss like this, so you want to stack all up underneath her ass like this, so that way when these spiderlings do spawn, everyone can just AoE them down at the same time. So like as a mage or something, just stand here, like this mage is standing here, and he can just press his blast wave button as soon as they go out. Melee and Sapper, blah 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 blah. Now it is very important. Like these spiderlings are not hard, they're not scary in any way, but you don't want to just completely ignore them. You do absolutely want to make sure you kill them within 10 seconds. Because if you don't, it becomes a problem for the next mechanic. All right, so you can see right there, they just pretty much insta-melted. It's all good, not worried about it. Awesome. By the way, Naxx can also target other people besides the main tank with necrotic poison. That's something I should have mentioned. It doesn't always necessarily just target the main tank. It's going to target some random players throughout the fight. So you can see I, for example, here get necrotic poison. If a non-tank, like if it's anybody besides the main tank that gets the necrotic poison, it doesn't really matter. You're not really going to take a whole lot of damage on this fight anyways, or certainly not any sort of like major burst damage on this fight. So it's not really a priority that you depoison this. Like ideally this gets depoisoned at some point, but really it's not an emergency thing like it would be if it's on the main tank specifically. Okay, so perhaps the most notable mechanic of this entire fight and the entire gimmick around Naxx is going to be her web spray. Web spray is an ability she's going to cast every 40 seconds onto the raid. And what it's going to do is it's going to incapacitate the entire raid, every single person in the entire raid, and there's absolutely zero way to avoid this for 10 seconds. Okay, so you can see it's on a set timer here. Like I said, 40 seconds. As soon as that 40-second timer goes off, everybody gets this debuff right here. And you're going to get wrapped up into this little web thing. The main tank is web wrapped. The entirety of the range DPS and the melee DPS are web wrapped. All the healers are web wrapped. Technically, yes, I guess as a rogue, you can vanish this. So if you want to vanish this once during the fight, go for it. But as far as I know, vanish is literally the only way in this entire game to prevent yourself from being web wrapped. Petri will not work. Bubbles do not work. Ice block does not work. Petri does. We tested that specifically. Petri does not work. DI, I doubt it works. No. So, when the web wrap happens, it means that it's the main tank. Like, Makesna keeps attacking, by the way. Makesna doesn't care that everybody's wrapped. Makesna will keep going the exact same way that she did before. So, she's going to continue attacking the main tank. So because of that, number one, like I was talking about before with these spiderling spawns that spawned 10 seconds prior to this web wrap, make sure that you kill those spiderling spawns before this web wrap happens. Because if you don't, or sorry, web spray, if you don't, the spiderlings, when you get wrapped like this, will continue attacking you. And if they're attacking like one person at the same time, like usually it's going to be a healer if they have heal aggro. If all of these spiderlings are attacking a healer while they're wrapped like this, the healer's just going to die in the web wrap. So it's not hard to deal with the spiderlings, just don't ignore them, because if this is going on and the spiderlings are just running free, murking people, then you're gonna have some clothies that are gonna die because of it. So just kill them, not hard. As far as handling keeping the main tank alive during this portion, this will always guarantee that there's gonna be 10 seconds where the main tank is gonna take auto attacks from Makesna and all the rest of her abilities as well. So the poison shock, and potentially the necrotic poison as well. The main tank is going to take all of that for 10 seconds during this phase. So, the question becomes, how do you keep the main tank alive without the capability of healing it for 10 seconds? What you're going to want to do specifically as a healer on this fight is, because the web spray is on a set timer, you know when it's coming. So you know when you're going to lose your opportunity to heal the tank for 10 seconds. So what you want to do is, as healers, coordinate in advance to stack as many hots on the tank as possible. Priests are also going to want to pre-shield the tank as well. Because basically during this 10-second window, you're going to be reliant on only hots to keep the tank alive, because you won't actually be able to cast any heals. So druids are going to want to get regrowth up. They're going to want to get rejuve up. Priests are going to want to get renew rolling. Priests will want to get like an 8 of 8 tier 2 priest to get the 8 of 8 tier 2 renew rolling. You're going to have another priest put a shield on. And then, also very important, don't forget this one, you will also need a rolling poison cleanse the entire time. Because if the main tank gets the necrotic poison during this portion, you can't just insta-cleanse it, right? You can't just you can't have a shaman press their cleanse poison, or you can't have a paladin press their cleanse button during this portion. So if the main tank gets unlucky and gets the necrotic poison and it's not cleansed while he's wrapped like this, then all the hots aren't going to do shit, because the vast majority of the healing doesn't work, and Makesna can very easily just kill the tank during this phase. So 2 ways you deal with that. One of 2 ways. Druids become useful. So either the druid casts the abolish poison buff on the tank, so that like the rolling poison cleansing buff that you have, so that way if you get the necrotic poison, like once the buff ticks, it will remove the necrotic poison. Or if you're horde, the more easy way to do it is drop poison cleansing totem, and that will just tick and remove the necrotic poison as well. It's vital that you get all of that shit onto the tank before the web spray starts, because otherwise, either if you don't get any hots on the tank, or you don't have poison cleanse, or both, the tank will die within those 10 seconds and you're fucked. And then once the web spray releases, so like once the web spray is done, usually what you're going to want to do, especially as horde when you have shamans, is assign some sort of rotation as healers for NSing the tank. Because if you did an awesome job at getting hots onto the main tank, you might actually just not even have to be worried about it. Like, just if you watch Praz's health during this, he's got so many hots rolling on him that like the hots themselves are enough to keep him up. But if like healers fuck up or they forgot hots, it's not the worst idea to have an NS ready to go and primed as soon as the web spray releases, so that way you can instantly top the tank back up. But assuming you end up getting multiple web sprays, and how many you'll get is dependent on your overall raid DPS, but assuming you end up getting multiple web sprays, you don't want to have every shaman and druid blow their load at the same time. You ideally want to have probably 2 shamans, like, okay, so these 2 shamans, you get the first NS after the first web spray, and then these 2 shamans and maybe a druid get the NS after the second web spray. The third set can go after the third web spray, so on and so forth. Who's Prowse in Classic? He plays a character named Prowse. I know. He got creative with it for sure. So, as long as you do all that, keeping the main tank alive during the normal portion of this fight when the web spray goes out is relatively easy. But the thing that's going to suck for the main tank specifically is that the buff cap situation is going to be completely fucked on this fight. The web spray is not a threat wipe. No, there are no threat wiping mechanics on this fight. As a main tank, you're going to have to be very, very careful with your buff budget on this fight. Like, if you have world buffs in particular, because you're going to have every single hot in the game rolling on you and a shield on you and a poison cleanse rolling on you all at the same time. If you come into this fight with full world buffs and you pop every single consume, you will without question get buff capped and lose a lot of your important buffs. So I'd recommend as a main tank, if you do come into this fight world buff, you're probably going to have to click off almost every one of your consumables, which sucks, but it's better than losing like your dire maul buffs and shit. Can you just wall it? You can, yes, but we'll get to why you don't want to just wall any web spray. You're going to be able to wall one of them, but it has to be a very specific one, and you don't want to do it for the first one. Alright, so the reason why I said that is because Naxx has an enrage. So as we continue along here, 3 more people got web wrapped, just kill them, easy. Spiders are going to spawn again. Once again, just AoE them down. Necrotic poisons go out as well. Alright, now, this actually, I'm really glad this VOD, what happens in this VOD happens, because this VOD is an excellent example of what not to do on Naxx when she gets low on health and she starts enraging. When Naxx hits 30% right here, she's going to enrage and start absolutely fucking trucking the main tank. We're not talking about like one of those plague ghouls earlier. We're like, yeah, they start hitting a little bit harder. Naxx fucking starts chunking when she enrages. She's going to start meleeing tanks for about 2.5 to 3.5k per auto. And that's going to be about every 1.5 seconds. So she's just going to be like frenzying super quickly and chunking the main tank. So even during the enrage phase, when you're not web sprayed, it's going to be, your healers are just going to have to spam the shit out of the main tank. And so you want to make sure you time this carefully. What you don't want to do is push the enrage literally right before the web spray happens, because if you don't give yourself time to get the proper buffs rolling on the tank when that happens, you could be in trouble. This is going to be an excellent example of how not to do Naxx and time this around the enrage. Okay, the web spray is going out in 4 seconds. Naxx just hit 30%, so healers have to get their shit up. And this, we were talking about before, is why you don't just burn shield wall on the first web spray. The main tank, when this next web spray goes out, so once again, the entire raid will be incapacitated for 10 seconds, the main tank will 100% need shield wall to survive through this web spray. If the main tank does not shield wall before this one, he dies. Just straight up, he's dead. No amount of hots in this game can keep up with the amount of damage Naxx does when she's enraged, so ideally this is where the tank walls. Spoiler alert, Prowse is not going to shield wall here. The healers get a bunch of their hots up. They do their job here. However, this is why also having a poison cleanse is vital. Prowse will get the necrotic poison right here. He's not shield walled, so all of a sudden all the hots rolling on him aren't doing shit. And, well, yeah, Prowse gets deleted. So, use shield wall. This was not the healer's fault. The healers did just fine. The problem is there wasn't a poison cleanse up, and Prowse didn't shield wall. That's why he dies here. So this is how not to do the Naxx enrage. Did he use it here? Oh, you know what? He did use shield wall. Okay, never mind. In that case, that just, I guess, goes to show you just how hard Naxx chunks during enrage. And because there are no hots to top him up, yes, Naxx kills him through shield wall because he's getting no heals during this portion. So you have to time everything around the enrage very carefully. When the one web, like, and basically you have to kill Naxx when you're below the, when you're below 30% and Naxx enrages, you have to kill her within one web spray. If you get a second web spray during the enraged, you are fucked. The main tank will die, and it's a wipe. And the thing that really sucks is like it's shield wall, right? So it's a 30-minute cooldown. So if you wipe on Makesna and your tank burns shield wall, you either have to have somebody else main tank Makesna with who still has shield wall up, or you have to wait 30 minutes for your main tank shield wall to come back up again. So with careful timing and making sure you don't push the enrage at the wrong time, it's not a difficult mechanic to play around because the web spray happens at a set interval, so it's not like you don't know when it's coming. Can you stop DPS before 30% to wait for a web spray, then burn her before the next one? Yes, that is the traditional way to do it. So if you're not trying to blast down Makesna as fast as possible, if you're not just trying to like go full on Zug mode, that is exactly what you do. Oh, he shield walled too early. Yeah, that makes sense actually. His shield wall fell off at the end of the web spray. That's probably what it was, yeah. Can you dual wield Fury Prot these bosses? You can, yeah. I would recommend you probably you have to throw on a shield, obviously, for the final web spray because you need to shield wall. And Makesna is not tauntable, no. No boss in this wing is tauntable. You can taunt the ads on Anubra Khan and Fairlina. Both their ads, both those bosses' ads can be taunted, but the bosses themselves are not tauntable. Okay, so generally speaking, as DPS, you want to save your cooldowns for 30% because, like I said, the goal is to nuke down Makesna within the duration of one web spray. In reality, that's not going to be hard. Keep in mind, 40 seconds between each web spray, you can easily kill Makesna sub 30%, but within the span of 40 seconds. Like, this boss in total only has 1.5 million HP. So the final 30% is what? 450 HK, or 450k health. Just nuke her down, pop your cooldowns like you normally would as a warrior or a mage or whatever, and she'll die just fine. It's just all about making sure you time the enrage properly. Is that a UTB in my bags? I wish it was, but no, this was an ash candy. Much less exciting, unfortunately. Alright, now the good news is, by some miracle, Prowse dies here, but we're still able to kill Makesna, barely. You can see warriors start trying to tank and start dying left and right, because if you're not a tank that's prepared to tank Makesna when she's enraged, she very quickly just starts murking people. But the good news is we had enough gorillas in this raid to just press our execute button and she still dies. But generally speaking, when something like this happens and your main tank dies during the enraged web spray, you're probably going to wipe. So just be careful in the timing on that one. What was the loot? What was the loot in this raid? I think we had a weapon off Makesna, right? Didn't we get like the dagger or something? Do I show it? There it is. Yeah, I got the dagger. Oh, wow, there it is. Very exciting. That's correct, B. Diddy, yes. And there you go. Get Makesna down. So, overall, obviously this was a very thorough breakdown of the mechanics of this entire wing. Overall, honestly, the Spider Wing's not hard. None of these bosses are going to be particularly difficult in the grand scheme of things. Anubra Khan is especially a joke. Fairlina, as long as your priests aren't brain dead, is mostly a joke. And Makesna, as long as your tank knows how to properly time the shield wall for that final web spray, and as long as your healers are on the ball with getting their hots up, it's not that hard to keep the tank alive during the web spray. Just make sure the tank shield wall is the last one. Spider Wing traditionally is considered to be the easiest wing in Naxx. I would argue that in 2020, the Plague Wing is probably easier, but Spider Wing is certainly one of the easier ones still. I'd say it's, if anything, the second easiest wing. And it's nice because Makesna drops a lot of juicy loot. Like, even the dagger's not terrible, probably like for hunters or something, and she obviously drops Kiss of the Spider, which I think most people would consider to be a good item. Wraith Blade's not bad either, right? It's alright. And so there you go. Now you're done. And just like any other Naxx wing, what you do is once you're done killing the final boss, then you move on to, like, there's a little portal that pops up in the room. This was always a retail vanilla bug where you couldn't see the portal sometimes, or you had to relog to see the portal, but eventually once you relog, you see this portal, you right click it, boom, you're back at the start of Naxx. You get to continue along your merry way for the next wing. I think this was actually the last wing right here. Yeah, we were ready for Saffron now. That's exciting. And so there you go. There's the Spider Wing.